Hello and welcome to everyone who's joined us here for this BIC hosted event at London Book Fair Online. My name's Karina Urquhart and I'm the Executive Director at BIC, or Book Industry Communication for the longhand version, and I'll be your host for this session. The topic for this session is the Green Book Alliance, making the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals a reality. Please do feel free to tweet about this event using the hashtag LBF21 and tagging at Green Book Alliance, details for which are on the screen in front of you now. So this event forms part 2 of the Business of Books track at London Book Fair Online. Part 1 was held earlier today on the subject of mitigating risk in the supply chain. So before we sort of get into the meat of the session, for those of you who don't know anything about BIC, just a brief update on who we are. So BIC is the long established UK-based dedicated supply chain organisation at the heart of the book industry, creating standards, best practice, policies and resources that form part of the DNA of the industry's supply chains. We help organisations become more efficient, save money, reduce waste and ultimately become greener. Find out more about who we are on our website. The link is on the screen in front of you there, and take some time to also check out our Green Hub that's also on that website. There's a lot of useful information there and you can find out information about our Green BIC branches, etc. You can also contact us at Twitter on @BIC1UK. So in today's session then, we're going to hear from the United Nations about their Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs as I'm going to call them from now on, and how all organisations in the book industry, however large or small, and regardless of where you are in your environmental journey, can contribute towards them and make an impactful difference. We'll also hear from the founder organisations of the Green Book Alliance, or GBA, and we'll learn how that alliance was formed in the first place last year, its purpose, its priorities, next steps and how you can get involved. We'll learn some of the findings from the GBA's first ever green supply chain survey, and we'll learn more about how many of the 17 UN SDGs already chime with or are set to drive the GBA's work plan for 2021 and beyond. Joining me today then, we have the following additional speakers. First off, we have Sherry Aldis. Sherry is the Chief of United Nations Publications in the Department of Global Communications at the United Nations. Then we have Noah Genner. Noah is the CEO at BookNet Canada, a Green Book Alliance founder organisation. And Brian O'Leary, Executive Director at Book Industry Study Group, or BISG as they're more commonly known, I think, in the US, another Green Book Alliance founder organisation. So then without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first speaker, Sherry Aldis. As already mentioned, Sherry is the Chief of United Nations Publications in the Department of Global Communication at the UN. Sherry's going to talk to us today about publishing for a sustainable future and how the book industry can really make a difference. So over to you, Sherry.
Thank you for the introduction. Welcome to everyone who's joining us today. Hopefully next year we will actually be able to be together in person. My name is Sherry Aldis and I'm the Chief of United Nations Publications. I started my career at the UN in 2015, which coincided with the start of the Sustainable Development Goals in the organization's 70th year. And they really have become the ever-present thread in our daily work at the UN, our main focus, and really our utmost priority. And even more today as we face one of our greatest challenges with the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I'm sure most of you know what the Sustainable Development Goals are, or the SDGs, as Karina said, or even the global goals, we call them sometimes. According to a survey done in 2019 by the World Economic Forum at Davos, 74% of adults globally are aware of them. But I'd still like to start with a short overview of the goals, including how they're impacted today by COVID-19. But my main purpose and hope today is to inspire and encourage you to participate actively in achieving the SDGs. The aspirations of the goals are very closely and naturally aligned with the values of the publishing industry across the supply chain, and our actions as an industry can have significant impact on success. The Green Book Alliance that Karina, Noah, and Brian will delve into at the end of the presentation focuses on just that. How can we ensure that the book supply chain minimizes its environmental impact as much as possible? But to start off, here's a brief overview of what the goals are and how they came to be. So what are the Sustainable Development Goals? We won't go into a comprehensive history of how they came about, but I would like to share a few key facts to provide context. It all started with the quite revolutionary concept of the Millennium Development Goals, of course, which ended in 2015. This idea of global cooperation towards reducing poverty and inequalities was expanded with the SDGs. We needed a new agenda to guide us from 2015 to 2030 for all 193 member states that took into account the current state of the planet, where tackling climate change is essential for sustainable development and poverty eradication. Now, the negotiations involved all 193 UN member states, intergovernmental committees of international experts, and civil society. It was a major global consultation to determine what the goals should be and what to measure progress against. Getting 193 different member states with differing points of view and priorities to agree to 17 goals with 169 indicators common to all was a true feat of diplomacy and a milestone success of multilateralism. There are lots of anecdotes, I'm sure you can imagine, about the process behind the scenes, and there are some books on that I can recommend if you would like to learn more. So here are the 17 goals to transform the world. A universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and improve the lives and prospects of everyone everywhere. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It means that we can and we have to promote prosperity for all while protecting the planet. Ending poverty must go hand in hand with strategies that build economic growth and address a range of social needs such as education, health, social protection and job opportunities, while tackling climate change and environmental protection. It's really about working together for an inclusive, sustainable, and resilient future for people and planet. These goals come with 169 targets that all have to be tracked. How do we figure out if we've made progress or not with all of the hugely diverse range of actors contributing to them around the world? So we've developed a framework, the Global Indicator Framework for Sustainable Development Goals, and we also host an annual high-level political forum on sustainable development, which takes place at the UN in July each year, so that's coming up very soon. And this really is the global forum for providing political leadership, guidance, and recommendations on implementing the SDGs. It's where countries, the UN, and other intergovernmental organizations, civil society, and businesses highlight the efforts that they are taking to achieve the SDGs. We look at what's working, what's not, at a global, regional, national, and local level. And of course, this process is supported by books. We publish many books on the SDGs. So my team, UN Publications, works to publish the UN's work in order to share reliable, verified, global primary source knowledge with stakeholders, academics, and just curious members of the general public. We publish this content online and in print in the UN's 6 official languages and many others. We publish it on UN platforms as well as with our partners and in commercial channels. We promote it with launch events on social media, using traditional and digital marketing, and by relying on the many international media channels who follow the UN's work. We work with actors across the supply chain to do all of this, from printers and distributors, technology companies, and editorial services. We collaborate with many of you here today in one form or another. When I arrived in 2015, we started working to create the first aggregated platform for UN content, which had previously been dispersed online in as many places as there are departments and agencies. So that's a large number. And bringing this huge body of work together in a consistent way was a Herculean task, but we did achieve it. And the UN iLibrary, which you can see on the slide, has become an important research tool and a simple user-friendly gateway into a complex body of work. Now it even has a search facet that allows users to search the content by SDG. But today, we can't talk about the SDGs or really anything else without talking about the COVID-19 pandemic. It has caused us to lose ground in achieving some of the goals. It has laid bare, as nothing else really has, the deep inequalities that exist. Now, we are seeing some light at the end of the tunnel at the moment, with vaccines and herd immunity on the horizon and summer on the way. And instead of being discouraged by the situation, as the Secretary General says, we need to look at the opportunity we now have to transform this moment into a turning point, giving new impetus to our efforts towards attaining our goals. One of our UN publications, the Emissions Gap Report, tells us that a low-carbon pandemic recovery could cut 25% off the greenhouse emissions expected in 2030, putting the world close to that 2-degree pathway that is set out in the Paris Climate Agreement. And this is really remarkably encouraging. We can choose to leverage this crisis when our usual policies and social norms have been so disrupted, to shift to a more sustainable economy that works for both people and the planet. And luckily for us, we already have the roadmap. We have the SDGs. We know what we have to do, and the SDGs are even more relevant now. I'd like to share with you a few of the impacts of COVID on the SDGs. So COVID is not just a health crisis. It has a serious impact on progress towards achieving the SDGs over the next 10 years, which we call the Decade of Action. So SDG 1 on no poverty, we were already off track to end poverty by 2030. And with COVID, an extra 71 million people have been pushed into poverty. SDG 4 on quality education. Progress towards inclusive and equitable quality education was already too slow, and school closures, as we all know, due to COVID, have kept 90% of all students out of school. Gender equality, despite improvements, full gender equality remains unreached, and COVID lockdowns have tragically increased violence against women and girls, with an increase of domestic abuse in some countries by 30%. Now, SDG 13 is a slightly less gloomy story. The global community has shied away from commitments required to reverse the climate crisis, but COVID-19 has led, nevertheless, to a 6% drop in greenhouse gas emissions. That's still short of what we need, which is 7.6%, but it's better. This unprecedented situation is really having a long-term impact on the future of people and planet. Having these indicators, being able to track progress, or the lack of it in some cases, provides us with an impetus to do better. Living through the pandemic has shown us how important it really is to focus on sustainability. So last September, we officially entered the Decade of Action. We have 10 years left to achieve the ambitious goals that we've set for ourselves. We've learned through COVID how we can act collectively towards a common goal when we need to. We've been protecting each other through mask wearing and social distancing, developing vaccines together and sharing them through COVAX. We've been helping our neighbors, our colleagues, and our friends when they were sick or lost a loved one, and many more daily actions that we have all engaged in everywhere around the world. We can use this same approach for other vital issues such as climate change and the other SDGs. We have the roadmap, and now is the time to implement it. It's the Decade of Action. So what can the publishing industry do to act? How can we contribute together to ensuring that we achieve the goals in the next 10 years? Well, even before the start of this Decade of Action, the publishing industry has stepped up in so many ways to contribute to the SDGs. There really does seem to be a natural alignment between the values of the SDGs and those of the publishing industry. By publishing reliable, high-quality content in all subject areas, publishers already contribute directly to the SDGs, and in particular, number 4 on quality education. Publishing as an activity in and of itself contributes to the goals directly through knowledge sharing, educating, and its positive impact on literacy, among so many other ways. Increasingly, publishers are even using the SDG framework to categorize their catalogs, providing an easy way for booksellers and distributors to frame content in ways which will promote the SDG agenda. And there is also more and more attention given to issues related to diversity in the publishing industry. Over the past couple of years in particular, there have been very public efforts to improve this area, which is encouraging and contributes directly to SDG 5 on gender equality and SDG 10 on reduced inequalities. Publishers are focusing more on producing content that is accessible to persons with disabilities, and this contributes directly to SDG 10 on reduced inequalities. More and more publishers are signing on to the Accessible Books Consortium Charter. There are already 100 signatories that's supported by WIPO, the International Federation of Library Associations, and the IPA. Printers are also using more certified paper and environmentally friendly inks. And across the supply chain, from shipping to pulping, traveling, photocopying, we are offsetting our carbon footprints. So what else can you do? Many of you are probably already adopting sustainable business practices and publishing content related to the SDGs, even without realizing it. And there are two main areas the publishing industry can make a real contribution to achieving the SDGs. Publishing content on them and communicating about them, and adopting sustainable business practices. So let's take a closer look at each of these areas and see what concrete steps that you can take. So publishing SDG content is a great way to raise awareness about the goals and the concepts behind them. Publishers are uniquely positioned here to be catalysts of change. If you aren't a publisher, you can still communicate about the SDGs, what they are and what you are doing to contribute to them on corporate websites, through social media, and in person to team members and partners. We can publish books on the SDGs for all target audiences, from children to academics, youth, and the general public to policymakers. We can commission new works on the themes represented by the goals, or tag existing books with the relevant SDGs. We can publish research that focuses on the concrete issues that need to be addressed. That will serve as a policy tool for policymakers and support academia and civil society in making progress. It also provides a scientific framework and a foundation for the goals that helps combat misinformation. And it's also a way to have international collaboration that helps us move forward together more quickly while taking into account diverse viewpoints. Children's books are another great area to publish in. They educate and stimulate young people to care about planet, people, and equality. We can also publish books with practical tips on how to live sustainably. That could be, how-to books or cookbooks, poetry, plays, and fiction on any of the vast array of topics covered by the SDGs, inspirational books of all sorts, and photography of nature, people, the changing planet. There are many, many topics that we can publish creatively on the SDGs. And if you do publish children's books on the themes of the SDGs, you may be interested to participate in our SDG Book Club. We created it in 2019 to raise awareness about the SDGs for children aged 6 to 12. It's done in partnership with the International Publishers Association, the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, the International Board on Books for Young People, the European and International Booksellers Federation, and the Bologna Children's Book Fair. And every month or so, we publish a list of recommended reading for one of the SDGs in all 6 official UN languages. We recently announced the book list for SDG 13 on climate action that you may want to check out, especially if you have children in your life. The URL is on the screen if you would like to look into that more. And so you have probably already adopted many sustainable business practices. There are some very obvious areas for publishing to contribute here in terms of sustainable supply chains and production, such as using FSC or recycled paper, or going digital, although we can say that's debatable given the carbon footprint of data centers. According to some estimates, by 2030, electricity usage from ICT could actually contribute up to 23% of greenhouse gas emissions, which is more than the automotive and aviation industry combined. So some food for thought there. Reducing travel is another impactful contribution that can be made collectively by publishers, and many of us are doing that today by participating remotely in a conference. And sustainable business practices can be implemented right across the supply chain. Here are just a few examples. So starting with editorial, We can start out by actually planning an environmentally friendly book. We can look at the specs, the packaging, the right quantity. We can consider digital formats. Through the pre-press process, we can evaluate how many proofs we actually need. How can we reduce color printing, ink and paper use? And we can also look at using sustainable energy sources in the office. At the production phase, paper is obviously very heavy in terms of carbon footprint. It represents from 50 to 80% on average of a publisher's carbon footprint. So we need to look at having paper that's locally sourced, that's certified by FSC, for example, look at the inks and the other materials used, and use digital proofs when we can. In terms of suppliers, some of it is about accountability. It's about just asking the question about their sustainable business practices. We can also evaluate the practices of the printers that we're using. For example, if they are subcontracting part of the process, that would lead to additional transportation in terms of the distance to the distributor and the paper supplier, so something to look at, and waste management. We also need to make sure that we're managing our quantities carefully and using print on demand whenever possible to avoid waste. At the distribution phase of the process, shipping is obviously very impactful. So how can we perhaps group shipments or avoid urgent shipments? Really evaluating the means of transportation that is actually needed. And again, holding shipping companies accountable for sustainable practices, just asking the question. Returns management, pulping is an obvious one, just making sure that it's done by a company who actually recycles. And we can monitor that by looking at the weight of the books that are sent out from the distribution centers and returned to them. Packaging, we can reduce the use of single-use cardboard and plastics. And we can minimize our stock because warehouses are heated and ventilated and cleaned, which is very impactful. And of course, too much stock leads to waste and pulping. And then finally, sales and marketing. We can really evaluate what we do in terms of packaging and displays. Are they reusable? Are they using recyclable materials? Obviously, no plastic bags for bookshops. We can look at the number of review copies that we're sending out, and we can really question if we need all of that printed promotional materials like catalogs and flyers. So we can also look at what concrete efforts the publishing industry can take for each SDG. Many of these are also applicable to our personal lives and can be implemented on a corporate or organizational-wide basis. The Green Book Alliance is working on mapping actions publishers can take to the SDGs as well. And there are some goals in particular that are very relevant to the publishing industry, but really action can be taken for all of them. So on SDG 1 and 2, we can look at company-wide efforts on combating poverty and hunger locally or internationally. For good health and well-being, we can encourage staff to be active and eat healthily, such as offering healthy options on cafeteria menus, or vegetarian options, providing gym or sports facilities, and it seems obvious, but it's not always the case, providing healthcare to all staff. So quality education, again, the publishing industry really does contribute directly to this, but we can also look at learning opportunities within our companies and our associations. How can we encourage training and mentoring? Gender equality, we can look at diversity and inclusion programs and objectives. Clean water and sanitation. Are we conserving the water that we're using in our offices? Are we providing access to clean and well-equipped sanitation and hand washing facilities, which is particularly important, of course, during the pandemic? Affordable and clean energy. Are we turning off the lights and the machines when we don't need them? We can use renewable energy sources and ensure that our buildings are well insulated and efficient. Turning down the thermostat and replacing light bulbs with LEDs are some other simple things that we can do. Decent work and economic growth. Do we really have fair pay for everyone? We need to reduce the gender pay gap. Are we actually doing that? SDG 9 on industry, innovation and infrastructure. We need to look at investing in clean and resilient infrastructure so that we're sure that staff is safe and that we're protecting the environment. And we can ensure the company is engaged with sustainable businesses throughout the manufacturing supply chain. SDG 10 on reduced inequalities. We need to promote equal opportunities for persons with disabilities and eliminate any discriminatory practices, adopting wage and social protection policies and practices that actually reduce inequality. Sustainable cities and communities, we can shop locally and we can encourage staff to bike or take public transportation by providing incentives and bike parking. responsible consumption and production, we can reduce waste. We can have recycling bins in the office that are conveniently located and responsibly disposed of. We can have an office-wide compost bin. And again, we can ask partners in the supply chain about their sustainability practices. Climate action is about traveling less, banning single-use plastics in the office. We've done that at the UN. There's a big banner in front of the building that says that no single-use plastics are allowed in the building. We can organize a no impact week, and we can also track and offset our carbon footprint. Life below water, we can use sustainably sourced fish in the cafeteria and provide reusable water bottles to staff. Life on land, we can look at, again, using paper that is certified from sustainably managed sources and diversifying plant-based food served in cafeterias. Peace, justice, and strong institutions. We can allow staff time off to vote and participate in civic duties, and always speak up if we see any form of injustice, bullying, or violence. Partnerships for the goals. So we can encourage donation drives in the office. We can engage in sustainable initiatives together. And we can voice support collectively for sustainable practices and commitments, which is what we're doing today. And that includes international agreements such as the Paris Agreement. So that sounds like a lot. So the next question might be, how do you start? How can you become involved? The 17 global goals are at first glance a lot to take on board and cover some really big challenges that society faces as a whole. Well, the first step is like anything else. You need to set a destination. You need to make a commitment to something simple so that you can indicate how important sustainability is to you, your staff, to others, such as your customers and suppliers, and to the rest of the industry. And this is why the United Nations and the International Publishers Association decided to create the SDG Publishers Compact. We launched it at the Frankfurt Book Fair in 2020, and it features 10 realistic, concrete actions that all actors in the publishing industry can commit to accelerate progress. Now, we have nearly 100 signatories from across the publishing industry supply chain and around the world. We have other publishing associations such as the IPA, the Association of Learned and Professional Scholarly Publishers, the Publishers Association of New Zealand, the Syndicat National de l'Édition in France, the Borsenverein, the German Publishers Association, and many others. We also have publishers who are members, so we have academic publishers and university presses like Bristol University Press, and children's book publishers like Kids Can Press. We have large groups like Springer Nature and Elsevier, and also smaller publishers with a more targeted or mission-driven approach, like Greystone Books from Canada or Stormbird Press from Australia. We have distributors, printers, and NGOs, publishing entities from Ethiopia, from Pakistan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Brazil, Mexico, of course, the UK, the US, and Canada as well. So we really want to encourage you all to join us in signing on to the 10 principles of sustainable publishing. And they cover areas like sustainable business practices, inclusion and diversity, and publishing SDG content that many of you are already doing. So the signatories to the SDG Publishers Compact commit to 10 actions that cover 3 core themes. Prioritizing sustainability, which is about making a commitment, reporting on your progress, and nominating someone within your organization who can be a central contact person. The second main area is raising awareness, promoting the SDGs within your organization amongst suppliers and in how you promote and acquire content. And then thirdly, taking action. We also want signatories to take action to see where they might collaborate either globally or locally, to dedicate budget or resources towards their sustainability efforts, and finally to pick at least one SDG goal to focus on. But however you contribute, it's welcome and it's important. I encourage you to choose at least some of the goals and make sure that you can achieve what you've set out for yourself as an objective. We don't all have to commit to all of the goals in order to make progress together. Now, joining is free. There's no cost to participate. It's an extension of what many of you are already doing, meant to strengthen your commitment and bring broader awareness of the SDGs within publishing houses and across the supply chain. And we would be very happy to work more closely with you all. And that really is everyone, from publishers and booksellers and library associations to authors and printers and technology providers, distributors, shipping companies, librarians. We're really happy to work with each and every one of you. And we are so encouraged and inspired by what you in the publishing industry have already done to support the SDGs, in spite of the recent challenges due to COVID-19 and the longer term issues the industry is facing. And we've learned during this difficult situation that we can work together to affect change and impact outcomes. So let's use that energy during the coming years to actually achieve our sustainable development goals. And there's even a whole goal for that. It's SDG 17 on partnerships. So thank you. I hope that you will join us on this path and look forward to working with you all in ensuring the publishing industry has a positive impact on achieving the SDGs in the next 10 years. Thank you for your attention and your commitment. And Karina, I will pass the floor back to you for more on the Green Book Alliance.
Great, thank you, Sherry. That was fantastic. I think it's interesting what you were saying about the SDGs being an ever-present thread in your work, and I think that's something that we certainly want to be doing at the GBA and further afield. We want to transform the book industry supply chain, and the UN wants to transform the world. So just interesting as well to see how the SDGs can all come together, and what you were saying as well about not having to feel that you have to do all of them or all of them, that you can select maybe one thing, because that one thing will make a difference. So I think that's really encouraging, that regardless of your size, your position on the environmental journey, there are things in there that all organisations can do and adopt. I thought it was interesting as well that you were saying that publishers are categorising their catalogues according to SDGs as well. So that's very interesting, and that's something that we will certainly, I think, our own organisations, Noah and Brian, will take away as well. So thank you for your time, and hopefully you'll be staying on for the rest of the session. This next section, following Sherry, will focus on the Green Book Alliance, its formation, purpose, work date, etc. We're going to hear about the results of the survey the GBA has done, and we're going to find out how many of the 17 UN SDGs that we've just heard about are set to have an influence and an impact on the GBA's work. So over to you, Noah.
Great. Thanks, Karina, and thanks, Sherry. It was very interesting, and we're keen, as Karina already mentioned, on all of the SDGs we can be involved in. So, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for synergy between the GBA and the SDGs. So, and we'll touch on that a little bit. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why GBA exists and how we formed. And then we're going to go into, as Karina mentioned, a little bit of the activities that we're working on and how they align with the SDGs that Sherry talked about at the beginning. So as you can see on the slide on the screen here, the Green Book Alliance has been in existence now for almost a year, about 10 months, 10 to 12 months. We started forming in spring last year, 2020. And really got going in the summer, later summer, as you can see there, September, we made an announcement. It was born out of, the Green Book Alliance was born out of a need and a want, obviously to align the book industry, the publishing industry, and book retail with environmental sustainability. And all three of our organizations, BIC in the UK, BookNet Canada in Canada, and BISG in the US, were either actively working in this space or actively looking at this space, and our stakeholders are very interested in environmental sustainability as business practice and socio-political areas. And the SDGs work came out about that time, as Sherry mentioned too. So all of these areas kind of aligned, and COVID was happening. All of these areas kind of aligned for us to kind of renew our focus in this area, leveraging on work that excellent work that BIC had already done on environmental sustainability. We began to discuss this in our kind of meetings. So we are supply chain organizations. The three organizations are very much focused on supply chain and improvements in the supply chain. But as Sherry presented in her slides, there's a lot of synergies between supply chain and environmental sustainability and opportunities in there, along with the SDGs, to leverage the businesses and the supply chain improvements for environmental and business improvements. So we wanted to take advantage of all of that. So the three organizations, we meet regularly, and we're meeting regularly because of COVID, and decided that maybe we would focus our initiatives together. That's another big thing. We want to make sure we're not duplicating work where it doesn't make sense to do so. So for events like this, discussions, research, and other areas which we'll talk about in a few minutes, we wanted to make sure we were aligning the initiatives and the organizations together. And so out of that, we founded the Green Book Alliance, and we are the three founding organizations, but we want to include many more, and we've already had outreach to other people, which I think we'll touch on a little bit in our presentation now. So we've launched the association, we've launched a website. You can see the URL down in the lower corner there, and we've done some initial data gathering, which we're going to discuss, and we've started to get things aligned, but we know there's much more to do, and we're excited to do that, and we're going to talk about some of those initiatives now. So I'm going to hand it over to Brian, I think.
Thanks, Noah. So when we get together last summer and started to ask how could a Green Book Alliance add value, we came up with a collection of 7 or 8 core things that we thought we'd do. Some are probably immediately available, and some are down the road. These included things like collecting and sharing best practice information and standards. This is something that all three organizations do pretty readily right now in areas that include metadata, rights, workflow, the supply chain, and product subject codes. However, we want to apply that for the topic of sustainability. There's an opportunity to publish environmental news of relevance to the book industry. There's a lot of information. If we can be a filter for that, that would be a useful thing. It's one of the reasons we brought the website up. We want to conduct environmental research, and in particular, we want an opportunity to align studies so that each organization is not funding its own, but rather looking at a topic more broadly. The supply chain is truly global. Most issues and implications for sustainability cross national borders. It's one of the reasons why the UN has taken an interest in this, and we think there's an opportunity for us as founding members, but also in working with other national organizations to align the work that we do to research and publish information about sustainability specific to the book industry. That gives us an opportunity to offer a central resource for environmental information and ideas. We are already hosting a number of different Green Book industry supply chain events led by BIC, really. They've been doing it for more than a year. And we've done both in Canada and in the United States some similar things, as well as taking advantage of speaking opportunities. Longer term, we see an opportunity to develop Green Global Supply Chain Awards that recognize positive behavior on the part of supply chain participants, including publishers, but extending to manufacturers, distributors, retailers, libraries, and other parts of the supply chain. We want to test the idea of a global or a Green Book supply chain accreditation to essentially encourage best behavior and best practices within the industry. That's something that BIC and in particular has done a particularly good job on over the last 15 or 20 years in areas that include metadata as well as returns. We think there's an opportunity to apply it to sustainable practices as well. And then we see an opportunity for the three organizations and more broadly than the international community to develop a green program of work, to identify best practices, and to roll out these things. And when we talk about best practices in general and aligning with the Sustainable Development Goals, you'll see how some of these initial drawing board ideas play out and align with the SDGs.
Thank you to both of you for those updates. So moving on to the survey that the Green Book Alliance undertook. The reason we undertook a survey was because, yes, we had lots of ideas about, the types of areas that the GBA should be focusing on and the types of resources, work, training, areas that perhaps we thought the industry might want to see from an organisation such as ours. However, we are only 3 organisations, so we wanted to reach out to the wider international book industry community and find out, you know, what was important to people, what was important to the industry, what work had already been done, what was, you know, and what was, where were most people sort of positioned on their environmental journey, because we wanted to know what be of best value to the key stakeholders. So, so we undertook a survey towards the end of last year, and what follows is a pretty whistle-stop tour of the results of that survey, and there'll be more information on a report that will follow shortly. So, in summary then, interest in sustainability is significant. 90% of those responding either have or plan to adopt a policy governing their efforts in this area, and 40% of those respondents were decision makers. So that's really encouraging to see that you know, the environment is very high on senior decision makers' agendas. We wanted to find out as well how much an organisation's environmental credentials affected decisions on whether or not to trade with another organisation. I think that's something that Sherry had already touched about, you know, just asking the question. So the survey revealed that when working with others, about half of those responding indicated that they do ask at least they do ask their trading partners some environmental questions, and a quarter don't ask anything at all. 8% said that they conduct extensive environmental reviews with most or all of their trading partners. But what do they do with that information? When we asked them to what extent the sustainability practices of partners affects their decision and willingness to trade with that firm, only 12% said that their decision is 100% influenced by their trading partner's response. Another 57%, so well over half, indicated that decision is somewhat influenced. Now, these two figures together are very encouraging, although obviously we'd like to dive a bit deeper into understanding the outcome of that influence, and we don't also know what the definition of somewhat influenced may mean. So it would be interesting to sort of revisit that question and see if we can tease out a bit more information. Over to you, Brian.
So much of the current focus that we heard from the survey respondents remains on product certifications, such as FSC sourcing for paper products. Those are kind of the established criteria. But the folks who responded indicated that they were increasingly interested in process certifications, both for themselves as well as for their partners across the supply chain. And we think that that's a move that's going to require both deeper discussions, I mean, what constitutes a good process, as well as a new body of research to establish best practices. We think that certifications, as I said in my remarks a few minutes ago, represent an area in which the Green Book Alliance can be helpful as a midterm resource. Beyond that, the responding organizations that participated in the survey have already taken steps to reduce their carbon footprints. The most common actions to date are probably the ones that you would expect. So greater use of print-on-demand technologies, ordering shorter press runs that would reduce waste, printing locally, and sourcing paper and distribution components such as pallets in an environmentally responsible manner. And then some organizations are also already setting KPIs and trying to measure impact, but they truly, to be honest, represented a minority of those who responded. About 28% indicated that they set goals today. Another quarter indicated they plan to do so, so slightly more than half. More than a third said that they do not set goals and measure progress toward them in the area of sustainability.
So I'm going to take the last two on the slide here. So as you can see, about 85% of people expressed interest in participating in sustainability events. There's definitely an appetite for information out there. So this Green Book Alliance has hoped that we can help get some of the information out through participating in these sustainable events. Right now, obviously, we're taking part in speaking engagements across the network, across the supply chain, and across our partners. You're attending one now. There are many others that I would call out that you can participate in. The BIC Green Brunch series that Karina's organization puts on are excellent, and you can get information from that on those events from the BIC website or from the Green Book Alliance website. And also the Green Book Alliance website has been updating where we've been speaking under our upcoming events tab on the site, so please check that out. But there's much more to come here. We will be at the at Frankfurt Book Fair and other large events presenting in partnership with others, so please check that out. Also from the survey, there was a great interest in research. And overall, probably from that research, the thing that stood out the most was that people were really interested, and we continue to hear this from our stakeholders and from our member organizations, that they're really interested in documenting the carbon footprint of the book industry. Where are they spending their carbon? Where are they doing things with ebooks, which Sherry mentioned in her beginning address? There's a lot of information about that people want, and research that we think that can be done on that. So there's an interest in the carbon footprint and the environmental impact of the current industry practices. There was also a majority that sought information on highlighting good efforts by particular industry segments, as well as developing metrics and guides to guide certification and supply chain awards. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that coming up. And now I'm going to hand it back to Karina.
Great, thank you. Just checking I'm not muted still. No. Thank you for that. Thanks, Noah. So, you know, with all that work and the survey results in mind, BIC actually reviewed the UN SDGs with its recently formed green supply chain committee to see where its efforts could best be, or most appropriately be applied, and 8 SDGs were identified where actions could be taken. Both BIC and the Green Book Alliance expect to focus on these areas. BIC from a predominantly UK perspective, and I should emphasise UK supply chain perspective, with a feed into and from the Green Book Alliance, with its global supply chain perspective, because after all, as we've already heard, the environment and sustainability are global concerns, as is the book industry, and in particular its supply chain. So just to be clear, in selecting 8 goals, SDGs, neither BIC nor the GBA is minimising the importance of all the other ones, but we're selecting a subset to help get us started, and to be realistic. Each of the SDGs has its own set of targets, and each target has a set of indicators to help monitor progress. The GBA will be working towards these goals and indicators that it feels best represent the book industry supply chain and where we feel we can all make a difference. So let's take a look at them then. Brian, do you want to start off?
Sure thing. So SDG 4 on quality education emphasizes things like affordable education, broader participation in the educational system, equal access, as well as education for sustainable development, cultural diversity, and the cultural contributions to sustainable development. Some of the things that we're thinking about in this area include collecting and sharing best practices, publishing news and related resources that are helpful in understanding what can be done in the book industry to promote sustainable development, and to serve as an essential resource for these kinds of questions and news and information. Under SDG 8, which is decent work and economic growth, a couple of the indicators are to improve resource efficiency, which is true for both consumption as well as production, and particularly to decouple growth with activities that degrade or worsen the environment and resources around us. And there's also a focus on material consumption per capita. So here our focus on providing essential resource plays a role, but so too does the supply chain award, because it begins to identify both the opportunities to improve as well as those best practice examples, either through the award or through accreditation, that reflect what the book industry is possible to support. And the developing a green program of work in this area would also be useful.
So just starting with 9, which you can see is around industry innovation and infrastructure. There are a bunch of targets in this SDG that we're looking at, but particularly this is around upgrading infrastructure and upgrading research, or doing research on industry and innovation, scientific research, which are both under, we think, align well with the GBA initiatives. So target 9.4 and target 9.5 under the SDG, for those of you scoring at home, are of particular interest to GBA. And then under SDG 12, which is ensuring a sustainable consumption and production patterns. Sherry touched a little bit of this again in the supply chain part of her presentation. We think there's a lot of opportunity here to align with GBA and supply chain initiatives. So of particular note that I pulled out were target 12.5, which is by 2030 to sustainably reduce waste generation through prevention, reduction, recycling, and reuse. Returns may have a component here, and then target 12.6, encouraging companies, especially large and transnational companies, to adopt sustainable practices and to integrate sustainability information into the reporting cycle. And again, this comes back to some of the stuff we saw in our survey around people capturing KPIs and metrics. But there's a lot more under this particular SDG that I think aligns very well with supply chain initiatives in the GBA, a lot around circular economy and just reuse and repackaging and reuse. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Karina for, I think, the last two.
So then the next two, 13, climate action. Take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. So in collaboration with other organisations, the GBA will work to improve education and awareness at all levels about the impact of our industry supply chain on the environment, and integrate climate change measures into policies, strategies and planning wherever possible, and encourage others to do the same. I can't remember exactly what the target number is for that one, but it's certainly in SDG 13. And the GBA will also, on that note, the GBA will encourage organisations to report about their impact on the environment in a standardised way. I think it's really important that we have a standard way of reporting so that we can compare like with like. And as has already been mentioned, there are plans to create a global supply chain accreditation scheme, and also to look at the potential for an award as well to recognise the efforts in this area, and also to monitor progress and to celebrate achievement. Number 14, life below water. The GBA will look to better understand and share resources regarding the impact of the book industry on the oceans and river networks, and encourage conservation and sustainable use of water, rivers, oceans and their resources. I think sometimes we forget that the impact that the industry does have on life below water, and just for a couple of examples, areas for consideration and that have already been looked at as part of the Green BIC Brunch series include the impact of shipping on marine life, waste product disposals and so on. So that was a very quick run through those two. So handing over to Brian now for SDG 15.
This has actually been written to promote development that protects forests, restores degraded forests, and substantially increases forestation. This is actually an area where at least certain aspects of book publishing are already doing pretty well. I mean, we treat forests as a renewable resource, but it's an opportunity for us to conduct research, environmental research in that area, to share best practices, and to use things like the supply chain award and accreditation to recognize superior performance throughout the supply chain.
Great, thank you. And then finally, SDG 17, partnerships for the goals. So in the context of the GBA, this final UN SDG is all about industry partnerships and collaborations, something that our 3 individual organisations, BIC, BISG and BookNet Canada, are well known for and excel at. As we've heard, the main goal of the GBA is to bring together information and expertise from around the world in order to work towards book industry sustainability through collaborations, partnerships, etc., with diverse key industry stakeholders. In this way, then, the GBA intends to mobilise and share knowledge, information, and help facilitate and promote the achievement of the relevant SDGs globally. Just to give you an idea, we've already been in conversation with many organisations around the world, including the Australian Publishers Association, the Publishers Association in the UK, International Publishers Association, the IPA, the AAP in the US, the Association of Canadian Publishers, etc., and various other organisations in Denmark, France. Have I missed anyone? We've had quite a lot of conversations, so that's all really encouraging, and it's the main thrust behind everything that we'll be doing at the GBA. So I will hand over now to Brian to hear about the next steps for the Green Book Alliance.
Thanks, Karina. I know that we're approaching the end of our window, so I wanted to talk about some of the things that we're firmly committed to doing in 2021. We're going to continue presentation of sustainability events. Noah did a really good outline earlier, and the website, the Green Book Alliance website, is a really good resource. We are forming an oversight council and soliciting support. One of the things that we have, it's not a secret, but we have to raise money to be able to fund research. Each of our 3 organizations is contributing to that, but we really need external support as well. And we'll be doing that over the course of the summer. And then we're going to frame at least 1, maybe more research projects that are aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals in the areas that we've just had a chance to outline.
In addition to those commitments, we are looking at some other stuff, as we've mentioned. Some of this comes out of the survey, and some of it comes out of talking to people in the industry. So we are working on a joint event, as I mentioned already a little bit, with the IPA and the Publishers Compact to happen this year at Frankfurt. So that's in progress. Stay tuned. We'll be passing more information on that. We are addressing the opportunities identified in the survey, as has been mentioned. We are working on checklists, or hope to be working on checklists that you can use when talking to your trading partners. Karina mentioned that a little bit about sustainability. And then we're also looking at publishing a solicitation and publication of case studies for any of our markets or anywhere else. So if you're interested in that, we'd love to hear from you on your efforts and your successes in implementing environmental sustainable practices in your businesses. Please reach out to us at the Green Book Alliance, and we'll see if we can work something out together. There's lots more on the doc, has been mentioned here, and we'll do what we can over the period of time we've got. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Karina, I think, to wrap up.
Yes, almost wrapping up. I'm conscious of the time, so yeah, but thank you, Noah. It's still early days for the Green Book Alliance, and as we've already said, we welcome and encourage participation even from other book industry organisations from around the world, regardless of your size and regardless of whether or not you think you're, not far enough along your environmental journey. It doesn't matter. We want to hear from everybody. As it grows in numbers, the Green Book Alliance will benefit from all sorts of perspectives of national, international and segment-specific organisations who can help shape priorities and implement studies and research and recommendations, etc. Benefits of joining the GBA will include the opportunity to select and shape those research projects, the ones of greatest interest, and to do so cost effectively, sharing the results across multiple markets. There'll be benefit from creating book industry specific resources, including shared information on sustainability efforts and best practices, and joining the GBA means that you will have a say, or your organisation will have a say, in defining and approving accreditation schemes and awards. As we state on our website, the GBA has been set up to work towards book industry sustainability. This is a global concern, and over time, the GBA website, with input from its supporters, will provide well, the intention is for it to provide a one-stop shop for all book industry environmental matters, and to hopefully become a valuable resource or a hub for information about each country's activities in this area. So I hope you'll join us, and together we will help our industry work towards book industry sustainability. Which just leaves me to say a huge thank you. So this brings us to the end of the session. And so I'd like to take a huge thank you to our attendees. Thank you for attending today, and also to our speakers, Sherry, Brian and Noah. Thank you for attending and speaking with us today. I'd like also to thank London Book Fair Online for inviting us to speak. To our attendees, I hope you found the session informative and that it's inspired you to either begin or to further your sustainability journey. The slides will be available on the BIC and GBA website shortly, and the recording, when we receive it from London Book Fair, will be shared on BIC's YouTube channel as well. So do sign up to either the GBA's mailing list, the website address is there on the screen, or indeed have a look at the BIC website. There's a mailing list section on there as well, and you'll receive an alert when that's ready. So just remains for me then to say I hope to see you at another GBA or BIC event very soon. Until then, stay safe and take care. Bye for now.